Today we'd like to introduce to you Roddy MacLellan, owner and founder of MacLellan Bagpipes. Welcome,
Hi, Steve.
Roddy. I thought we might just start with the origins of your piping, bagpipe making, and what brought you to the United States, possibly.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Glasgow, in Scotland, and attended art college there. I went to Glasgow School of Art. And at the art college, I studied silversmithing, jewelry design, metalwork, some woodwork, wood refinishing, things like that. But when I finished college, I decided I wanted to travel. So I took off from Glasgow, traveled around a number of places, ended up in New York, and was very fortunate to get a job with the company doing silversmithing, jewelry work for companies like Cartier, Tiffany's in New York. I did a lot of restoration of antique silver for Sotheby's and for Christie's. So I trained as a craftsman, and my whole life has been as an artist craftsman. At some point, I had taken piping lessons when I was a kid, and then, like many kids, I suppose, gave up on it. But maybe having left Scotland, at some point I realized I really missed that aspect of it. So I decided to take some piping lessons. I was in New York, fortunate to meet some really good top pipers there. And believe it or not, it came to the point, like most, students of bagpiping, you're on your practice chanter, you've done 6 months, a year, you've got a couple of tunes under your belt. All right, Roddy, it's time for you to get a bagpipe. Where are you going to go for a bagpipe? So having the background as a craftsman of making things, I decided I'm going to make a bagpipe. Let me give it a shot, make my own set. So I took measurements off one of the guys who was taking lessons with me, had a bagpipe, took some measurements off that, and went ahead and actually made a bagpipe. So I took that into practice one day, and my instructor said, this is about as good as anything we could purchase right now. So there are a couple of other kids in the band there who were learning, bought instruments from me. And so MacLellan Bagpipes started as essentially as a hobby for me. And then slowly but surely we have refined the process, refined the product, refined the sound, and hence MacLellan Bagpipes been around now 25 years.
That's a great story. That's a great story.
Yeah.
What would be your general philosophy in design and what you're reaching for or to achieve with your instruments? They're a very unique, beautiful instrument, and they're very eye-catching. Right. So I'll leave that with you.
Yeah, sure. As I said, the first set was made by measuring an existing instrument, which is how many people have approached this. We'll take a classic Henderson bagpipe and measure it and try and make one that good. So over the years, I studied many instruments. I studied classical bagpipes. I got hold of lots of them and went up and down the insides of all the bores, got all the measurements. And I've developed what I like in the bagpipe, which is a very broad sound, lots of harmonics, a very rich sound. So the first thing we had to nail down was the quality of sound that we wanted to achieve, that I wanted to get out of these. And that's created by all the individual bores through the bagpipe and by what's going on in the bell. So we had that, we developed that, but on the exterior of the instruments, I guess because I come from an art background rather than an engineering background, to me the looks, the visuals of it were extremely important. And although we started copying someone else's bores, externally I always wanted them to be my own. I wanted them to be something different from everyone else's. I didn't want to just redo what Mr. Henderson or Mr. Laurie had done in their day. I wanted something different. So my approach has always been to take the basic components, your bass top, your bass mid, your tenor tops. Internally, they have to perform, it has to be a really stable instrument. Externally, you're able to do many things with this. It's still a bagpipe, it still has the 3 drones, but it's always been important to me that the details and the finish on the wood, all these things, the visual aspect of them is extremely important to me. So I've always strived to be a little bit different, where a bagpipe's a bagpipe. Army regulation pattern is pretty much what you see everywhere. Prior to the turn of the 20th century, different makers all had unique shapes and profiles, and most of my profiles are, if you want to call them, artist impressions of some of these older instruments. So we haven't copied them per se, but we've gone back and looked at some of the old ones to get some of the ideas of what we're trying to produce. I wanted them to be aesthetically interesting, but unique. And so I believe MacLellan Bagpipe, you can spot them like in mass bands or somewhere. They're always just that little bit different. The woodwork, the metalwork, the engraving that we do, that type of thing, is all just separates us a little bit from the crowd.
That being said, it's hard to find two instruments that are similar within the MacLellan bagpipe world. Each one has a very interesting look to it.
Right. I mean, I do a lot of custom work. A lot of people come to me and say, well, I like this profile, but can you do a different cap, or can you do something with the engraving? And yeah, I like to do that. We do a lot of one-off pieces, custom engraving, clan crests, and all types of things. So I like the idea of individualizing them, and a lot of the customers who come to me are people who want something just a little bit different, that specialized, unique for them.
When it comes to the woods you like to use, I know there's a number of things you use for your mounts and your ferrules and such, but your main two woods that you like to use are cocobolo and African blackwood, right?
Right. Yeah, the African blackwood comes from East Africa, Tanzania. It goes from there to either Germany or Britain, and I purchase my wood from Britain. It then will come to me. It comes in billets, 14 pieces, square blocks.
And those are brought in per set. It's a complete set where most people could identify which piece is going to be
there'll be a big
piece.
piece as our base top. There'll be the smaller pieces for the tenor tops. They're usually about ½ an inch extra long than we use them at. The ends are waxed. So the first thing we do when we get the wood in is turn it from the square billets to round, and then we drill a pilot hole through them to allow the wood to dry. So
it dries from the inside.
It has to dry from the inside out,
equally.
otherwise the inside, the heartwood, is where it's wettest.
Okay.
Once it's drilled, we're going to set them on a shelf, and it's dated, and we're going to leave it there for at least a year before we will then come and final drill it. And that curing process is what the wood has to do in order to relieve its stresses and the moisture content to kind of level off, so that when we turn it, we know that it's pretty much as stable as it's going to be. It's not going to change shape on us down the road. Minimizes the amount of cracking that will happen. The cocobolo, which is here, this reddish wood that you can see here, this comes from Central America. It's also a rare wood, is on the protected list. Very, very hard wood, very oily wood, which are things you need for any woodwind instrument. It's got to be able to maintain its moisture content, but it also has to stay round. All different woods have what they call tangential stability, which is, if you make something round, does it stay round or does it go oval? And so blackwood, cocobolo, a couple of other hardwoods are ones that will do that. So even if they shrink, they stay round. And that's important to us because the bagpipe does change, it does move. But these are the things I was looking for in other woods. So the cocobolo, not only is it beautiful wood, but it's a really, really nice sounding wood. Again, going back to pre-First World War, those makers did use other woods. Cocos wood was a beautiful wood that came from Jamaica. You can't get any more. But when I was doing my research, I realized it didn't all have to be African blackwood, which is the wood most people use for the whole of the 20th century. When I went back further, we were able to find out they used other woods and they sounded wonderful. So that was why I wanted to do some research. And when we made the first few bagpipes out of this stuff, not only were they beautiful looking, but they just had a wonderful, rich, warm sound. And so there's the types of things that I look at that gives us a different look, a different profile here, but a different look to the instrument. Still is a great wood. It's going to last. It's going to not crack on you. It'll last 100 years, but it's just a little bit different than blackwood. It's a real rich color and a real rich tone.
Right. And then as those billets that have been turned and dried for that year, as you said, when that set is taken to be machined, you have a plan as to what set it's going to be to the end.
Right. At that point, 99% of our sets are custom made sets. So if we're making a set for Steve, when we pull these billets off the rack, it goes onto a board with dowels in it, and your name will go on that, and then all the custom details that you wanted, the engraving, the different wood mounts, the moose antler, whatever all that is. So right at that point, we're starting to make your instrument. We don't just go to a bin and pull out 2 tenor tops and then assemble it. We start right from there, and this set from then on is made for that one person.
Wow.